approve the planning and transportation commission minutes from April 7th meeting. Any questions on it?
Can you turn your microphone off? I just got a sign. Can you turn it off?
Oh, thanks. Okay, got it. Sorry. Any comments or questions on the minutes from last April 7th meeting?
I move that we approve the minutes from April 7th.
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, no opposed?
One abstention.
One abstention, okay. Okay, let's get into the public hearing. Number one. 16 V05, Los Altos, LP Bridgepoint, at Los Altos Avenue. The variance to increase the lot coverage to 37.5% for a new trellis and covered walkway with a maximum of 30% lot coverage, which is allowed for community facilities in R1/10 district. Mr. Dahl.
Yes, good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. Zach Dahl with the Planning Division. The item before you is a variance to allow for an increase in lot coverage beyond the maximum 30%, which is allowed for community facilities in the R110 district. The community facility that we are looking at is Bridgepoint. It is a senior living community. If we can get
Or
this
maybe not.
toggle or not. Well,
Oh, something just happened. Up.
there we go. All right, I've got a couple of shots to give you a little context here. Here's an aerial, thank you to Google, of the vicinity. As you can see, it is a two-story facility located on Los Altos Ave, just south of El Camino Real. You do have the gas station on the corner, single-family housing to the east and the south and the west, and then you have some commercial hotel and multifamily uses along El Camino Real. The zoning is R1-10 single family. This is an existing community facility. As it exists, this facility was originally built in the 70s and expanded in the 80s. And as part of that expansion in the 80s, it did receive a variance to allow for an increase in lot coverage beyond the 30%. The item before you today is they are looking at upgrades and we're looking at landscaping, improving the parking lot to add additional parking, exterior modifications, as well as other changes to improve the facility. As part of that, they are looking to add new lot coverage, not new floor area, in order to better serve the residents and the visitors at the facility. The first part, which is a covered walkway, as you can see highlighted in blue. Right now, due to the design, the entry sits significantly back from the drop-off area in the parking lot circulation area. It's about 115 feet, I believe. And so what they are looking to do is provide an open covered walkway to provide for protection from the elements, for residents coming and going and getting picked up and dropped off. So this would not create an intensification of use, but it would improve how the residents are served by the community. In terms of its visibility off-site, as you can see, it's primarily enclosed and within the existing building massing with some small visibility through the parking lot. However, due to the mature trees and vegetation, the visibility from off-site is very limited by this new covered walkway and vestibule. The second portion of the lot coverage variance is seeking for a covered trellis over the barbecue area in the courtyard. It's the other highlighted blue area. Completely surrounded by building, would not be visible off-site. So in both of these cases, these are improvements to improve the existing facility without intensification of use. And really, the 30% lot coverage limitation is in place to limit the bulk and mass and ensure that it doesn't dominate the surrounding residential neighborhood. So in this case, approving the variance would still meet the intent of this requirement, which is not increasing the bulk and mass and visibility of this facility off-site, which it would not do. It is consistent with the intent of the zoning ordinance, and there is a special circumstance applicable to the surroundings in that you do have this challenging entry situation where and older residents have a longer journey to make, and if it's raining or if it's very sunny, it can be more challenging. So this will improve the usability of the facility. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the variance subject to the listed findings, and I am available if you have any questions.
Is there anyone speaking on behalf of the project?
Yes, the applicant is here tonight.
Any questions for Mr. Dahl? Can we hear from the applicant?
Good evening, members of the Planning and Transportation Commission. My name is Kevin Sherrata with Kisco Senior Living, and I represent the owner and operator of Bridgepoint at Los Altos. Kisco is a family-owned company based in Carlsbad, California that owns and operates 22 senior living communities in 7 states. For over 25 years, Kisco's goal has been to provide exemplary service in warm, secure, and friendly environments. Bridgepoint at Los Altos includes 137 apartment homes with common area spaces and offers independent and assisted living. The average age of our resident is 87 years old. Some of the services and amenities provided at for our residents include 3 meals per day, weekly housekeeping and laundry services, a wellness program, scheduled transportation, and planned social events. We are currently planning our renovations that will include both interior and exterior improvements, such as street frontage, parking lot, and entry walkway. These improvements will provide a better living environment for our residents. The existing drop-off area is over 100 feet from the main entry and exposed when there is inclement weather. This makes it sometimes difficult for our residents to walk through, particularly during the rainy season. The covered walkway will be a pedestrian-friendly entry into the community and provide a safer path of travel for our residents and visitors. The addition of the vestibule will help provide protection from the weather and winds that affect the reception area when anyone enters and exits the community. This feature will be similar to that of many communities where the lobby area is located next to the entry. The new trellis in the interior courtyard will provide shade for our residents and allow them to enjoy the outdoor space, particularly during the warm summer months for events such as barbecues and family gatherings. We feel these improvements, along with the rest of our renovations, will enhance the community and will provide our residents a better quality of life. Thank you for considering our application.
No questions for him? Okay. All right, commissioners, want to start?
Sure.
Do we have any, I don't, oh, wait a minute, I have a public comment. Which one did you want to talk about? Is this the one, Jim, you want to talk about? No, I didn't think so. Okay. Okay, item 4, all right. Thanks.
I support this variance. It sort of meets all of the standards that I think of in terms of it's enhancing the use of the property, it's improving quality of life, it's not having a detrimental effect on any neighbors, and it just makes a lot of sense, so I'm supportive.
I agree with everything that Ronit said. I just had a couple questions. On C1, it's called out as decomposed granite in the parking area, and I think that's probably just a mistake. In the landscape plan in L1, it's concrete, but I just wanted to make sure that wasn't the case.
Yeah, along with this variance is just focusing on the elements that increase lot coverage. They do also have a permit into the city for site improvements, as I mentioned, for driveway circulation, exterior modifications, and a package of other improvements to the site. And yeah, as shown in the landscape plan, it looks like it's a stamped concrete, not a decomposed granite. So we'll make sure that the plans are clarified when it comes in for building permit.
I can support it according to the findings and conditions in the report.
I also support it. I do just want to, and this may be a quibble, but on findings about special circumstance, the fact that it's already exceeding the allowable coverage really doesn't by itself justify a further variance usually. So, right, I mean, just because you're already out of compliance doesn't mean you can go further out. So just keep going as far as you want. So really, to me, the special circumstance is everything after that part in that that the arrangement in place since of the existing buildings, blah, 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 et cetera. So I would just prefer to take out the part about because you're already out of compliance, we don't care, because we do. So, thank you.
I also agree that this project does meet all the findings and really won't impact anyone on the outside of the building. But as an architect looking at this site in person, looking at it on paper, it all made sense. But once I walked in there and I saw the size of that courtyard, it was hard for me to decide if this structure in the middle of this courtyard isn't going to really negatively impact the quality of space that's already there. You know, a beautiful fountain. I realize it's outdated, but it just seems like the structure of this trellis is massive, and it really will break the courtyard into two halves. And you really can't have a place to sit and have a barbecue in between these columns. It's really meant to be a walkway. So my suggestion would be, I'm supportive of the project, but would be to maybe lower the heights or somehow change the scale to make this a little less bulky of a structure. And there's just quite a few posts, 16 by 16, I think is what it is, or 18 by 18. It just seems like they're big and they're close to each other. So that's just an architectural, point of view. Again, from the standpoint of planning, this is definitely in compliance, and I would be supportive of it.
Okay, I'm agreeing with everybody here. You're improving an existing community facility. You're not really making something bigger or increasing any variances. So I think you're just enhancing what's already there. So I don't see a problem with going along with it. I don't have the architectural eye that you have. Any comments on that from the owners? What do you think about that?
Hi, my name is Gladys Bowen. I'm with Shelter Architects. Just to respond, I understand, I think I see what you're seeing. I think that when you go out there and see that space quite often, it's very empty and kind of open, and the seniors, when they do come out there to kind of sunbathe, like when I was out there today, they're like just around the edges and the corners. And so our thought was really, if we do have a barbecue or a gathering space, it happens in the interior courtyard where the barbecue pit, the barbecue is. That's mainly the main gathering space. And then here in the front courtyard, if you look at L 2.0, what we've done is to create small gathering and seating areas that are a little bit more intimate and can create small social gathering spaces. And I think everybody agrees that water fountain feature is huge and just out of scale for that space. So we did a smaller one up against the wall and a lot of landscaping. So that's why we were comfortable with that, the sizing of that. And then also for allowing for multiple, like if a resident and family come in, that they can easily walk underneath it and not have to gather and walk behind one another. So I think those were our initial thoughts when we were designing that covering.
And at 8'11", it looked like the plate height for that structure. Do you feel like there's any way you could reduce that height? Because it is open, I guess, underneath. So you do get plenty of height as you're walking under it. It just seems big with the pitched roof and.
Yeah, if you look at the kind of the cover sheet, you can see where there's like an entry canopy to the building, and we were trying to match that because that scale within that space felt comfortable to us, we didn't want it to feel too enclosed as they were walking by. So to be able to have some height, we thought be appropriate.
Can I hear a motion?
I move that we approve application 16V05 at 1174 Los Altos Avenue, subject to the findings and conditions, with finding C, 2C being modified to say there is a special circumstance applicable to the property in that the arrangement and placement of the existing buildings on the site is unique in how they are function in relation to the parking and site circulation, with no intensification of use. And then the last sentence, strict application, blah, 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 senior residents who live on the property.
Do I hear a second?
Second?
Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, 6-0. Okay, next will be, item number 3 is 16 CA 01, City of Los Altos, a code amendment to the timeframe of the design review for use permit application.
All right, good evening, Chair, members of the commission. Zach Dahl with the Planning Division again. This item before you is a handful of code amendments aimed at clarifying and improving our review process with relation to commercial, single-family and commercial multifamily design review, variances, and use permits. And so there's a couple items. I'll go through each one. Some is clarifying, providing clarification where there was none before, and then we are adding recommending the addition of a couple elements to improve the process for applicants and residents. So the first one is to provide a definition for when an application is deemed complete. This is a practice the city already employs. We base completeness on providing all of the technical requirements provided in the handout for the subject application. As you can see in attachments A, B, and C, I have included the submittal requirements for single-family, commercial multifamily design review, and use permits. And the basis of this definition is based around the department's handout and these submittal requirements. And so what this does is, we didn't have a definition now, so this is really clarifying and ensuring that if our determination of completeness is challenged, we do have something in the code to fall back on.
Do you want comments after each one, or do you want to run through the whole thing and then we'll come back?
Whichever you prefer. I mean, at this point, if you want to make it.
Let's run through them all and then we'll.
Okay, so providing a definition for completeness. We are also recommending that we establish a time frame in the code for applications to be deemed complete. And so really what this is this is saying, because at this point, we've kind of had an informal policy. Generally, we look anywhere from 3 to 6 months, a year, where we encourage applications to resubmit or are you going to move forward and abandon your application? Jurisdictions vary. Some require a few months. Others go as long as a year. Many have it more as just kind of a policy. A handful of jurisdictions do have it formally in the code. However, if you want your deadline to have teeth, it does need to be in the code. And so what staff is recommending is that from the time that an application is deemed incomplete, an applicant has 180 days to resubmit to address and provide for those technical requirements, 6 months basically, and then we are including a provision that the director can grant an additional extension of up to 180 days or 6 months if there is a special circumstance or something such as a change in consultant, financial issues that might require an application to go longer. The real basis for this is that over time, codes change, and if an application stays active but incomplete for too long, the goalposts shift. I think a good example is the recent change in our water-efficient landscape requirements. The state handed down a change, so an application that came in a year ago may have been deemed complete at the time for their landscape requirements, but if they stayed incomplete on other issues, now all of a sudden we need to reopen the landscaping requirements. And so the goal here is to, once an application is submitted, keep it moving forward in order for it to be deemed complete. Once it's deemed complete, that locks in the codes that it is subject to and then allows for a clear understanding of the applicant, staff, and the public as it moves through the review process. So if it stays incomplete too long, there's now some question as to which codes it's subject to, and that can create ambiguity, and ultimately it can muddy up the process. And so really the intent here, and few applications fall under this, most are motivated and are able to get submitted, deemed complete, and move forward. But for the handful of applications that do drag on, this will provide an end date to where they either need to get the information in, or they're considered withdrawn, and then they'll need to resubmit when they are ready to move forward. So that's a primary recommendation that staff is encouraging the Planning Commission to adopt, is establishing a time frame. And this is just for it, from the time of being deemed incomplete to getting deemed complete, providing that technical information so they can start the public review process. Once deemed complete, this time frame would not apply.
Now, I do suggest that if you have a question on an item, you ask it at the time that he's doing it, because there's 6 items and,
That's why I was asking.
yeah, okay, yeah. What I don't want is to summarize.
Well, I had a question about in the review for completeness paragraph. It was, will consider the application, the community development director will consider the application complete. You're using community development director as if it's the planning czar. And I wondered if there was a deliberate choice of language as opposed to saying the Los Altos Planning Division, because I have a feeling that the director may not actually have to pass on everything. There's stuff that staff does at staff level.
In general, when there's an administrative decision, the buck ultimately stops with the community development director. So in essence, they are the
The czar.
approving body for an administrative decision.
Right.
And so that's, I mean, if you look through the zoning code, there are different terms. Sometimes it's planning staff, sometimes it's city planner. Community development director, and within these sections, I've recommended clarifying to replace city planner with community development director. And the goal is that that's the appropriate term that should be used, because any administrative decision is essentially falling under the decision-making authority of the community
Okay,
development director.
that was my question.
Okay, so those are the first 2 recommendations.
I have a couple of questions about the 180 days.
Uh-huh.
You said many jurisdictions incorporate this as policy, and only a handful have made it code. What jurisdictions are you talking about? What are our neighbors doing? How many did you consider? And specifically, which towns are we talking about that have
So-
actually incorporated this into their code?
This particular language is modeled after the city of Campbell's. They do have theirs in their zoning ordinance. Most other jurisdictions have a policy that they enforce, but it's not in the code. We contacted Mountain View, Los Gatos, Saratoga. I believe there was 8 jurisdictions in all. Of those 8, 2 had it in the code. The rest just had it as an administrative policy. And I know for Los Gatos, for example, at the end of a year, they had to pay a second round of fees if they wanted to keep their application alive. Other jurisdictions looked at 90 days, 60 days. There was a range. 180 days I believe this was what Campbell had on the books, and it felt like a good middle ground where you're giving an applicant time. And also, when an applicant resubmits, they get another 180 days. So you have 180 days from being deemed incomplete to resubmit to provide the necessary information. If you're giving us piecemeal information, that doesn't count. But if you resubmit with addressing all of those comments, you've submitted within 180 days. So the goal is to keep an application moving.
So what would happen in a circumstance like, let's use the bunker case, the parcel, the commercial piece. He brought it to Planning Commission, and we denied it. He had to go through another 45-day process, came back, we denied it. Then it went back to City Council, so all this time goes by. Next thing you know, he's way past his application process. What does he get to do?
No, but it's different between application and
He's been
being
deemed
seen.
complete at this point. The first step in the development review process is you're submitting an application, and staff reviews the application for technical completeness, provides comments, starts the environmental assessment. Once an application is deemed complete, that means applications you see have already been deemed complete. So at this point, the 180-day time frame would no longer
So
apply.
complete, it doesn't have to be accepted by.
It's just,
Yeah.
Okay, I get the difference. All right, okay,
So this is just to get past the staff level evaluation.
okay.
I have a couple more questions. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So the first one is, would this change be applied retroactively to people who have already submitted applications?
I had that same question. That's a good question.
Julie can weigh in on this. My understanding is that from time of adoption, any existing applications would have 180 days starting from that date. So it does apply to all existing applications, but it wouldn't be retroactive. The 180-day clock would start when, after the second reading and adoption. From that adoption date, yeah, once it goes into effect, any existing application would have 180 days from that point.
Okay. And then finally, I know as an attorney, we make changes to agreements or contracts and codes when we deem that there's a deficiency or there was like some wrong we're trying to fix, some mistake. And I'm wondering what necessitated this particular change, like what projects would have been affected by this in the last few years that we feel needed this kind of push.
Has someone been abusing the department?
There's a handful of projects, a couple single-family and a couple commercial wireless applications that have exceeded. Well, single-family they're a year and a half in. For the wireless and the commercial project, they are in excess of 2 years. And so really, in looking at it, there wasn't a way to formally push these applications one way or the other without a code on the books. This had been a code amendment that had been discussed internally for some time, and then looking at these applications, it appeared this would be a good time to move forward and make this recommendation for the Commission and Council to consider.
I can chime in on this. There's also, after you get approved, there's many jurisdictions have a 1 year, but usually it's a 2 years to act on your ARC and site application or act on your use permit, and then those will also expire. So in zoning law, there are certain time periods that you can get approved, but then you need to vest it, you need to start building, you need to do something, and like a building permit is good for 180 days. And then but you can extend it another 180 days. So there is a lot of these codes that kind of keep you get approved, you start building, you start doing something. If not, these uses are, these entitlements are going to expire unless you reapply. So I know PD zonings, a lot of them are 2 years. Don't we have to act on our use permits within 2 years? Design review within 2 years? So this just sort of follows that intent to keep things moving.
Alex had a question, Jerry. Alex had a question.
Go ahead.
So I saw that the city had 30 days to make a determination whether the application was complete or not. Is that right? But I didn't see anything on, is there a timeline for when the city has to act on a complete application?
Yeah, so on the city's end, the state has adopted the Permit Streamlining Act, which requires jurisdictions to provide comments to meet certain benchmarks and timeframes. So there's already state law that dictates, and that's where the 30-day deadline comes from, in order to avoid jurisdictions taking too long to respond to a development application. So in essence, this is saying we also have the same expectation from the applicant as well.
Got it. And then are there any third-party reports that could take longer than a year? So a CEQA, environmental review, anything else that just fundamentally would not be able to met with that 180 and the 180-day extension?
Well, after you're deemed complete, that's when you have a project, and that's when we would initiate the environmental review and look at initial study and see if it's a neg deck, mitigated neg deck, or an EIR. And the other thing that's the Permit Streamlining Act and also the Subdivision Map Act, because there's also a requirement to act on maps in a certain amount of time, but that's all triggered when the neg deck or the EIR is complete. So you won't run into, because some EIRs take a year and a half or more. So the Permit Streamlining Act or the Subdivision Map Act on a tentative map won't be triggered until the EIR is completed or the neg deck is completed.
And so what you're saying is that you are not The EIR is not part of the completion process. The documents are complete, deemed complete, and then environmental review.
Yeah, and usually you need a complete application for a complete project description to base your CEQA document on, so.
And then also to follow up with that, there are other technical reports such as traffic, noise, maybe a biotic assessment, other environmental-related assessments. The initial documents, it's the expectation that those are prepared before the application is submitted. So unless there's something new that's discovered, if you've got a larger technical report, usually that'll be prepared in the expectation, and a developer would generally do this. You have, when you submit your application, you also include your technical reports. Staff may have comments and need clarification, but the initial report should be done at time of submittal, unless there's some issue identified that wasn't previously known. But even there, I mean, a 6-month time window is usually adequate, and that would also qualify as a reason to extend it another 180 days if there was a technical report that took longer.
So, Zach, one more question. You know, I feel like in this city, big projects take time, and I'm wondering when I think about, you know, like the Packard building and 400 Main and Safeway and the hotel, would any of those have actually met the 180-day timeframe, or would they have required an extension for extenuating circumstances?
I can only speak for the projects that I was the project planner for, which was the hotel project, Safeway, the residential condos at 100 First, and the condos at 396 First, and then the office building at 496 or 467 First Street. In all of those instances, from the initial incomplete letter to resubmittal and getting deemed complete, all of those projects, that action occurred within 6 months. Because generally, these applicants are motivated, and getting deemed complete is a high priority for them. And so for any big project, there's always going to be usually at least one incomplete letter, sometimes a second, but usually one. And in each of those cases, I'd have to go back and look specifically, but it usually felt like it was 3 or 4, maybe 5 months between that incomplete letter and when those materials were resubmitted. Because in each one of those cases, these were motivated applicants, and once they have their development application in, usually there's costs, carrying costs on their end, and so they're not interested in taking any longer than they have to. So in those cases, it was never an issue, and I'd have to go back and look at the specifics, but in each case, my recollection is they resubmitted relatively quickly once an incomplete letter was issued.
So again, I want to make sure I get this right, because I don't want to make a mistake. Let's assume that the applicant has what they need to have done within 180 days, okay? Is this making a noise?
It is.
Yeah, there's an
feedback
echo.
on it. It's
It-
okay.
Maybe they don't hear it in the back.
And that applicant continues going through a process that doesn't get approved for 6 months, a year, or even longer.
The
Still,
timeframe
the
would.
timeframe for that applicant doesn't matter.
The moment they're deemed complete, this deadline no longer applies. So once they're deemed complete, that's when they go to Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. That's when they go to Planning Commission. That's when CEQA
So the length of
environmental
time we
review
take
starts.
doesn't
Yeah,
affect them.
you could review a project 5 times. The 180 days would have no bearing on it. This is at that initial application, and part of this is also to encourage applicants to not submit until their application is ready to submit, because we don't want an application coming in and acting as a placeholder. And this is a rare situation, but this provides a clear expectation for both staff and applicants, as well as the public, that you're serious about your application, it comes in, and you're ready to move forward with it. So that's really what this establishes, and ideally, this is something that never gets used, but once it's on the books, there's a clear expectation for every party as to terms of what our time frame is from application submittal to when we want to see it deemed complete so we can move it forward.
Why would Los Altos need this codified if 6 out of 8 of the neighbors studied can just fulfill the same purpose through policy?
Each city needs to come to its own legal determination in terms of what is enforceable for what they need to get done. And in this case, it's staff's recommendation that this puts staff in the best position to work with applicants and ensure that applications move through time in a timely manner. If you look at each city, codes vary depending on their case law, their determinations, and what they identified as priorities. So what is clear is that every city has a timeline like this. Each of them choose to enforce it in a different way.
I have one more which Jerry made me think of. Supposing there was a building code change coming in July, and an applicant for a significant project came in with what we would call in our office skeleton plans in order to get in as under the deadline before the code changed. Is that affected in any way by this completeness?
Any application that's coming into the planning, I mean, when you submit your application for a planning design review application, you're realistically at least 9 months to a year away from submitting for your building permit. So it really, that wouldn't have any bearing on what building codes affected you. You could theoretically do that if you knew a zoning code change was coming in, you could get in, but that would also seek to discourage that, or hopefully you can address your comments within 6 months.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
Okay. Moving on to the next recommendation, and this is really because there was a lack of clarity in the code. This is to establish an appeals process for administrative design review for commercial and multifamily applications. Right now, if you have a facade improvement, tenant improvement, or addition under 500 square feet, and this is to any non-single family property, public community facility, multifamily, commercial, or office, it can be, the design review is handled at the staff level. However, the code doesn't clarify if there is, say, an administrative denial, the process for that applicant. Right now, it would automatically get kicked into the Planning Commission City Council process, which for a minor project, it doesn't necessarily need to happen. And so what staff is recommending is that we provide an appeals section which clarifies that if there's an administrative decision, primarily this would focus on denials or maybe an approval with a certain condition the applicant didn't agree with, they could appeal that decision and it would go to Planning and Transportation Commission. And if it's resolved there, it stays there, or it could continue on to City Council. But really this avoids overburdening in taking any minor project automatically through Planning Commission and City Council. So this was recommended as a means to provide clarification where the code didn't address it and avoid a cumbersome review process if one isn't necessary.
Questions?
I just have one. Why 15 days versus 30? I mean, oftentimes, like if someone were going to appeal, at least a design review, if something was going to be appealed to council, I believe they have 30 days. So this is administrative. So is the 15 days the rationale for 15 versus 30 because it's administrative? Easier item, or?
Well, actually, all of our appeals are 15 days. So this is consistent, yeah. So even for a commercial multifamily design review or single family, the code specifies that you have 15 days from the date of the action to appeal it.
Okay, I was recollecting wrong then. I thought that if a project got denied, say at Design Review Commission, single-family home, that an applicant had 30 days, or a neighbor had 30 days to appeal the decision to City Council. Is that not correct? Okay.
Yeah, it's 15, and so.
Okay,
this
then
is-
fine, no question then. Sorry, my recollection was wrong.
No.
Okay, next.
So the next one on here, and this is similar, this is establish a public review process for modifications to an approved use permit. Same thing here right now, and I think you've seen a couple recent modifications to use permits. And with the sweet shop, because it was in an existing commercial business, it was allowed to stay at the Planning and Transportation Commission level. However, there was a recent use permit modification to the daycare private school over on the Almonte Church. Very minor in nature, however, it was required to go Planning Commission and Council. This recommendation, similar to the appeals process, for minor modifications to an approved use permit, allow them to have one public meeting before the Planning and Transportation Commission with the provision that it could be appealed, or the City Council could call it up as well. So this preserves the council's ability to consider a modification if they deem it necessary or worthy. But for minor projects, then again, why require them to go through a two public meeting process when it's very clearly minor and one public meeting suffices to meeting the goal of establishing public review?
So I understood the purpose of this, but I thought the language was a little peculiar. When you say the action of the PTC shall be final, it's not final at all. What you want to say is, as you did, that it is the decision-making body. Then you can say there is an appeals process, and you list it. Because in fact, it's not final if you can appeal it.
Well, is final unless,
Well, final means final. So I think you shouldn't say that. I think you should leave that out and say it's the decision-making body. And then you say their decisions may be appealed in these two cases. It's not final if you can appeal it. We have had things where we were, when the planning commission was, before it was reorganized, it was final and there was no appeal. That to me means final.
I don't think there's any action that is truly final at the Planning and Transportation. Is that the council does have the ability to call up any decision made at the PTC for consideration if they choose. I had used this language, I'll go back and double check. I believe I'd use this because it was consistent with other sections, but
Okay.
I mean, points taken, but I think the goal of this was it's final unless, the
Okay.
key word after it, but I believe in looking at that, I crafted it, in general, in crafting code amendments, I try to base it around other language
Okay.
to consistency, but there's always, just because it's there doesn't mean that it can't be improved upon.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, and last?
And then the last item here that is being considered, and this is really just a clarification, in the application requirements or fees section, there's some antiquated language that's much more prescriptive, and what I'm proposing, or what's being proposed here, is that it be generalized and depend on the use permit submittal requirements handout, so that right here, there's very specific information that if we wanted to change would require a code amendment. Really, the submittal requirement should be based on the handout, so if we need to change or update things over time, it doesn't require a code amendment. So this is really just a procedural clarification, finding that there was some antiquated language that was no longer appropriate. And this would make it consistent with the other process sections in the zoning ordinance. Also, as I noted, there are a couple of minor grammatical changes proposed, primarily replacing city planner with community development director. And the other minor changes within the use permit section, and this is consistent with the intent, where it clarified office and commercial uses only require a Planning and Transportation Commission review for a use permit, which is consistent with the intent, which is commercial uses. It had previously included office, and oftentimes office and commercial intermixed. So if you look at the proposed language in that section, I can highlight that for you.
Questions? Okay, is that something, do we need to vote on this? I'm assuming
His
we do.
recommendation.
Yes, you do.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
Can we have some discussion?
Oh, I thought I did that, no? Okay, yeah,
We did questions.
okay.
Are we talking about the whole package? Okay, so
Well, you can- I mean, if you want to I think if you want to specify that we make a change to a item,
okay, so I have no problem accepting or approving the clarifying, from the bottom, clarifying the submittal requirements, establishing a public review process, establishing an appeals process. I'd like to discuss the 180-day timeframe.
okay?
So I'm happy to move on the other three, and then we can continue the conversation, or we could do it all at once after.
Why don't we do a quickie straw vote on that? Because if Renita's the only person who has concern at 180 days, then we could actually,
Well, I would want to hear her logic before I made that conclusion.
all right. In that case, I move that we recommend approval of the amendments to chapters,
The
Wait a
last
minute.
three,
the last three,
they're the last three.
Or would it be all amendments with the exception of the 180-day?
yes, please. What he said.
We'll go with that.
Need a second.
Okay, I need a second?
Second.
Okay.
Not on.
Any discussion on those three items? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Ronit, you have the floor.
Okay, so my issues with the 180-day timeframe is that I think we need a lot more information in order to make a better evaluation of this change. When I read it, I thought that we need to know what our neighboring cities are actually doing. And I would like to see more detailed information about what Mountain View, Los Gatos, Saratoga, these 6 jurisdictions that we reviewed that are not doing this, and the 2 that are, what does that language actually look like? And I'd like to expand it beyond just 8 neighbors to see if this is something that's really necessary. And I also thought that the language of where it said that the extension could be approved by the community development director only for extenuating circumstances was extremely vague and unclear. And I think it just leaves too much discretion, and will lead to disparate treatment, where one case they could say, well, we'll give you a 30-day extension, and in another case they'll give 60, and in another case they'll give 180, and there's no standard, and it's unclear, and I feel like we already are struggling with a perception, whether it's real or not, that applicants have been disparately treated, or their projects. And I think this exacerbates it. It feels onerous. I mean, I think if it's intended for a couple bad actors, why can't our policy take care of this? And if the bad actors are really a single family or a commercial wireless, I'm curious what their perspective is. I think of a single family, homeowners are extremely motivated. They've paid their fees, and things come up. They may get back 30 comments, and they may need to do an environmental, and they may need to do engineering, and they may need to do traffic or noise or...
Not for a single family.
Well, things take time, and homeowners and people take vacations, and they may have issues that come up, and I mean, I don't see how this benefits anybody other than they're bumped out and they have to spend all that money again, resubmit everything all over again. It just seems very heavy-handed.
And what would you suggest? Some kind of a study group?
I would like to see what other people are doing and how they solve this through policy.
But I mean,
Because
how would we go about doing that? Would you suggest commissioners, getting some commissioners together? What would you suggest? Putting it on staff, or?
Well, I think, maybe a couple, or handful of commissioners could work with staff to just to dive a little deeper into this issue, and see, what are others doing? Why are we doing this? Who does this help? How does it help? How does it help? How does it hurt? And having a better understanding. My hesitation is I feel like when we review these ordinance changes, we do it in an empty room with no comment from the public and with very little discussion. We almost had none today. But for my concern, and no analysis. We adopt it, and occasionally it has very significant ramifications that we didn't quite appreciate or understand. And I'm thinking of, in particular, like the interior height. These things just sort of like barrel through, and they end up having a real effect on people, and it's hard to unwind. So I would like to see more review and analysis done on something like this.
Zach has a response.
Zach?
So I can actually provide you more details on the research that was conducted by staff. This was done by a member working in the city manager's office. This is for 9 jurisdictions without Palo Alto. For the city of Campbell, code states that after 6 months of inactivity, an application is considered withdrawn. City of Cupertino, it's not in the code. In practice, if project planner feels the application is inactive, the project planner will send a letter asking the applicant if they want to proceed, request response within 60 days. Los Altos Hills, not in code. In practice, they send letters to applicants after about 8 months of inactivity asking if applicant wants to proceed. Staff gives applicant X number of days to resubmit. No additional fees are due. Los Gatos, 10% of current fee due after 6 months of inactivity. New application and 100% of current fee due after 1 year of inactivity. Menlo Park, not in code, but permit application explains deposit for time and materials required. A letter is sent after 6 months of inactivity. Additional fees are collected if needed. City of Mountain View, not in the code. In practice, if applicant is inactive for 6 months, project planner will send letter asking if applicant wants to proceed, request response within 30 days. City of Santa Clara, not in the code. In practice, if project planner feels application has been inactive for several, approximately 10 months, planner will send letter asking if they want to proceed. If applicant wants to proceed, the difference between what was paid and current application fee is due. City of Saratoga, no requirement. Some applications require additional time and material deposits. City of Sunnyvale, not in code. In practice and on a case-by-case basis, the project planner will send a letter asking if the applicant wants to proceed, request response within 30 to 60 days. If applicant wants to proceed, the difference between what was paid and current application fees are due. So that is from 9 surrounding jurisdictions.
Okay, so just having been read that in the last minute, I can tell you what we have drafted is significantly different. Because the word that you use in every single one of those is inactivity, and the word in here is incomplete. And that's very different. An application is inactive if somebody has done 0 on it. But it's incomplete even if they are sending back reports back and forth every other day, every other month. It's a different characterization. In every instance, you just said inactive, and here that word doesn't exist. It says incomplete. So this is what I'm talking about. I think we may not realize, but by saying that something is incomplete, an applicant may think, well, I think it is complete. I just submitted another traffic analysis. I just presented a parking thing. But it may not meet what the city has as defined completeness. But that certainly is not inactivity. Inactivity is you do not hear from the person for 6 months. Not a call, not an email, not a submission. It's very different.
The intent here is actually to be consistent with inactivity because when you resubmit, you're restarting your 180-day clock. The goal is that you resubmit to address the incomplete letter, staff will evaluate, and if a second one's needed, you restart that 180-day clock.
I could support the word inactivity as long as when someone is, as long as we're on the same page about activity versus completeness. It's in my mind, it's very different. And that's, they use different language in those jurisdictions.
I have a question. Do you take studies separately, or do you always want them all together at once? So do you take comments, answer to 5 comments separately from another 5, or is it always you expect one package? That's what I understand.
Yes, the goal is that when you resubmit to address all comments and not in piecemeal, because oftentimes it's challenging to review an updated traffic report if you don't have an updated project plan in front of you.
So from my point of view, being the architect, homeowners are usually my clients. The ones who take longer than 6 months are not serious, and they understand that the consequence of not making decisions after 6 months is that it's going to just cost a lot more to from the consultant's point of view, from everyone involved. So most of the time, people who do take that extra time are the ones that accept the fact that things are going to change. I do like the deadlines, and I do like giving deadlines to my clients because it really pushes them to make decisions. Sometimes they need that extra push. But I think what I understand with the building permit is that I've had several projects where the term expired and they appealed or they asked for an extension, and there wasn't a need for an extra circumstance. It was always granted. It has never been a case where they said, no, sorry, we can't give you the extension. So the extension is always, granted, and that gives you a little bit of a reassurance that, you do have a year, but you want to push them to get that in 6 months if possible. So maybe that extra circumstance that you're talking about can be defined a little bit better.
In the case, you had two cases that you thought of immediately that had been somewhat abusive of the lack of limit. Would inactivity serve you as well as lack of completeness for those 2 cases? The single-family residence and the cell phone tower?
I think that it would be important to provide a definition for what inactivity means. The concern there is that you get a piecemeal resubmittal to keep the application going, and it's really not meeting the intent, which is, if it's really taking that long, then it shouldn't have been submitted in the first place. And our goal is oftentimes we will push applicants, and if they don't have a complete application, we oftentimes won't accept them, and we'll send them away with lists, you need to provide X, Y, and Z before we can even take you in. But the goal with using inactivity would that it could promote, well, we'll give you a traffic report now, and then we'll give you the project plans in 3 months, and then, so it's, you do a piecemeal resubmittal to keep it going if your intent is to draw it out, versus this provides a much clearer, and as I mentioned, in every case, project applicants that are serious about moving forward, 180 days or even an additional if needed is easily achievable once you've got your application submitted, because the lion's share of the work on their design has been done toward getting it deemed complete.
I just have a question, because I'm a little bit confused just by something you said. So it was just really, for me, a clarification. Because you said that if someone responds to a letter and it's still deemed, as long as they respond, but it's still deemed incomplete, then the 180-day clock resets. And so it seems like it could go on in perpetuity if that's the case. Right, because I send in 3 out of the 6 things.
That's exactly what Zach was referring to.
Right, but then that's what I don't understand, how if the clock does reset, then this doesn't really solve the problem.
That's not what the wording says, though.
That's
So
not what the wording says, that's why I'm.
right.
So then, yeah, actually, I think I may have misspoke. Yeah, the goal is that it's deemed incomplete. The goal is also to promote that a comprehensive resubmittal is provided versus an application that maybe addresses a handful of things. And really, this isn't addressing discretionary calls such as design of a building. This is technical submittal requirements, because staff could say, look, we may not be able to support the design, but that's not a completeness issue. Providing a traffic report or providing a comprehensive site plan that shows all the details, that's a technical issue. So that's really what being deemed complete means. It means you've got a site plan that meets our specifications, elevations, renderings, your technical reports. We may not agree with the findings, but that's not a completeness issue. That's a discretionary decision that'll be reflected in the discussion that moves forward and through the public review process. I don't know if that addressed your question. Or
No, it did, I just, I wanted to be clear, because I wasn't seeing, I thought the language was slightly different from what you had described, and then I didn't think what you described actually we'd end up in a place where we'd have finality, because if you submit it partially and you reset the clock, you could be doing that for
Well, and
5
that's the
years.
difference between inactivity and completeness. So if there are 16 things that are required, and someone turns in an application of 16 things, but staff looks at it and says, you know, this is an inadequate whatever, or the survey does not show the neighboring properties with the adjacent houses in a single-family residence, and we need that, then you give them a list of corrections, and they have 6 months to provide their corrections for completion. Once they have all the documents in, then they go in for review. From my perspective, both from single-family and from large-scale development, if someone is motivated, and they are, they attempt the gold standard is to turn it all in and have you say, yes, you're complete, and continue. I don't think people deliberately under-submit, and in fact, if they attempt to, my understanding is most jurisdictions won't accept it. There's someone at the desk who is a technician who has a list, and they go, you have this, you have this, you have this. They don't judge whether the survey is complete. They don't judge whether the arborist report has all the trees, but they look to see that you have it before they'll take it in. And so from my perspective, I think having a 6-month set for completeness and an additional 6 months, and actually what it says is you can request an extension of up to 180 days. So it's not as though the development director is saying, I'll only grant you 30 days and therefore could treat inequitably different applicants. The applicant says, please, may I have this? So,
But the director could say.
yes,
"You
but I
only
have
get
to
30
say, but that's where I'm with Bahi, which is in fact, in practice, at least in my experience, when you ask for an extension, unless you have been incredibly flagrant about not being cooperative, I've always had extensions, I've always seen extensions granted automatically, because the goal of the building department and the planning department is to keep things moving. And if you say, I'm in distress, I need help, they often bend over backwards to help you. So,
Well, what about a scenario where you get back 30 things that are incomplete and you respond to 28 and you think that the last 2 maybe aren't required? Maybe it's an environmental report, or maybe it's a second traffic study, and you don't think that you need to do it. You disagree on whether it's necessary. Your conversation, your ability to have that conversation with staff terminates based on, you have to, if you're coming up on that 180 days, you have to then, I think, if you're an applicant, you just say, I can't continue to have this discussion. I'm going to just have to do it because I risk having to pay, again, tens of thousands to just start over.
well, actually, that's true if you don't ask for an extension.
Well, what's it like if
Well, if
staff thinks something is required and you do not, what's the likelihood of them giving an extension?
Well, the
on
answer is,
180
and then
days?
you say, thank you very much, sir, and you hand in what they ask for, because that's what you do as a professional. When someone who is in the position of authority says, our department requires 30 things, and you say, well, I don't think I need to do that. You can say that to your heart's content, but the bottom line is the department tells you what they want, and if you want to argue, you need to appeal it later to some higher body, but the fact is, if someone says, in the city of San Francisco, if they say, you need a historical review, I'm not going to say, my building's from 1908 and it's a piece of crap. I went and did a historical review.
So who do you appeal that completeness analysis to? Where is
You
that?
you go to city council and you say, I don't like the way the department's being run. I don't.
Julie, is that anywhere, reflected in this? Is that what, someone says, I think I am complete, and planning says, or I don't think I need to, what?
There's always
But there's a
How is that
document that lists everything you need to do.
And there is, the code outlines a general administrative appeals process where you can take a decision and petition council to reconsider it. And that's true of the interpretation of any code, because whether it's the public works director, the police chief, building codes are at the state level, but anything else that's in the municipal code, there's various department heads that are tasked with administering that section, that chapter. But any of their decisions, if you're strongly disagreeing, you can petition the council, and there's an outlet for that.
Okay.
Well, and actually, in the attachments, the submittal requirements are for everyone. If you don't agree with the city's submittal requirements, you shouldn't do a proposal there until you attack it at some other level, because by taking the attachments that are part of this, that's what your job is. They say this is what you do, and you say, yes, sir, and you turn it in.
So I would just might say my last thought is incomplete is not the same as inactivity.
True.
And we would be the outlier, because not one of the other ordinances read to me today used the word incomplete.
That was the summary provided by the staff person who reviewed those. I can't vouch that that's the exact language in the code. That's just the summary that was provided.
So maybe more review could help.
And actually, inactivity is a term that I'm more familiar with in use of building permits, where nothing is happening at the site and it's inactive.
Mhm.
It's unusual, and we've had several of those in town, for which we had very little we could do about it. But in terms of planning, I think completeness is more appropriate, because it's not inactivity. There are requirements, they are specified, you pick up your handouts, you check them off, you turn them in. It's not a matter of being inactive, it's a matter of fulfilling the requirements.
And there's often a dialogue during that incomplete period where staff is communicating with the applicant. We're often doing a preliminary check or review, or discussing topics with them. We may have a conference call with their traffic engineer. So there's, with any application, there's always a robust dialogue that's going on. So that's also why inactivity may not be an appropriate word, because they could be active, but they could be calling the project planner every 3 or 4 weeks, or shooting over a draft, but that doesn't constitute addressing the incomplete issues that may have been outlined by the project planner. That just includes an active dialogue, and there have been a number of applicants that are very active, but they're not necessarily getting any closer to being deemed complete.
I agree with that. I think the one thing for me is that if we want to take the ambiguity out of it, and we're okay with going up to 180 plus 180, why wouldn't the extension just be a 180-day extension for everyone?
You could just use 180 days up to, because an applicant may say, hey, we only need 60 days. It gives the discretion, because also the goal is encouraging applications to move along. So if an applicant only needs 30 days, but the only thing is 180 days, so the goal is give them up to 180 days. They may only need 30 or 60 days, but provide that flexibility, so we're not automatically saying you have another 6 months, but if you need it, you can have up to another 6 months. So providing the flexibility to evaluate if their traffic report's going to be completed in 3 weeks, then maybe the director says, all right, well, we'll give you 2 months, because that appears like a reasonable period of time. So it's just providing flexibility as opposed to just one type of extension.
Right, but they could still complete it as quickly as possible and get it in. It just keeps the,
It could.
it keeps the, in my opinion, it keeps the playing field
Parity.
level for everyone, right? Because shouldn't care if one project gets in a traffic report in 2 months and someone else gets it in 4 months. After that initial period, everyone should have the same amount of time. And to me, it takes the discretion out of it, and everyone feels treated fairly, and they know what the rules are going in, and there's that ambiguity is out of it.
Though I do want to agree with the point that Phoebe had made earlier. It's the applicant is making the request. The applicant may request in writing, so it's giving them the flexibility. It's so if the applicant wanted to request 180, it's fine. It's not community development telling them what their extension should be. It's them requesting it. This is just what Phoebe said earlier, which I think is exactly as written, so.
Yeah, I guess it's just unclear, because to me, it seems like the applicant could request 180 days and be only granted 30.
Well, that's an interesting point, because if someone asked for 30 and got granted 30, there'd be no question. If someone asked for 90, is there some way that the language could be, well, you're saying either it's a denial, either the community development director says, no, I'm not going to extend it, period. Or you say, I don't want to, you've been playing around with us too long, sir. I'm not going to give you 6 months. You have 3 months to get it together, or else you're out of here. So I think that's kind of what you're looking at as a downside.
Yeah, and to me, if we're willing to live with 360 days total, then.
That's not much improvement from staff's point of view.
Either way, I mean, functionally or administratively, I think it's your discretion if you feel it's clear to just make it 180-day extension. Oftentimes when you have extensions, it's up to, because for that very reason, they may only want to request less, or there may be extenuating circumstances where there's an appropriate amount. But if you feel you just have one 180-day extension, I think it still meets the same intent, which is to provide for those extenuating circumstances.
I know every project I've ever built, time was of essence for me. I mean, if you said I had 90 days and I thought I could get it done in 15 days, I'd do it in 15. I mean, I wouldn't, so.
I think the
I don't think we have to,
extent-
I don't want to discourage timeliness, I'd like to encourage it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have 2 items on the table. The first 2, which are defining the requirements for design review variance permit applications, being deemed as complete, and establishing 180 days for applicants. So how do we?
I thought the first one was already approved. The only one that
I thought it was
wasn't was
second.
180
Because
days.
everything but 180 days was
Okay,
approved by the
all right,
first.
then 180 days. Would anyone like to put an offer on the table?
Well, I move that we recommend to City Council that the expiration of application be within 182 days as it's written with, with the ability to extend up to 180 days more, as approved by the Community Development Director, I would omit the words "for extenuating circumstances."
Same here.
Renee, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's,
Well, I would not support that.
Okay.
But we don't have a second.
Do I have a second? Well, I just wanted to get her, do I have a second on that?
I
Okay.
second that.
Okay, all those in favor of that?
Aye.
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 I'm gonna vote no because I'm still too confused to make a decision, so I'm gonna go with Renee.
Alex?
So who voted which?
So
Yeah,
there are four.
I would support it if it was,
Remove the extenuating.
if it just became 180 days, plus you get an extra 180 days.
Isn't that what you said?
No, she says up to.
An extension up to because Zach said that was the language that was consistent with,
Either language means the same thing.
well, then if you want to make a friendly amendment,
What are you thinking?
he would like
I mean,
it
it
not
seems
to
to me
eliminate
that-
the words "up to." He would say an extension of 180 degrees as approved.
um,
Jolie's gritting her teeth. I was saying you're gritting your teeth because we're messing with language. Always makes you happy.
I would like to make a friendly amendment.
I'm waiting for you. So what are you thinking?
My friendly amendment would be, because I want this on the record, is that we revise the word incomplete with inactivity.
And I can't accept that.
No, I
Aye.
think the inactivity part goes back to the building permit versus the application package.
Okay.
So I'd like to propose a friendly amendment, which would be the applicant may request in writing within the 180-day time period an extension of 180 days that shall be approved by the Community Development Director.
As opposed to up
As-
to?
As
Maybe.
may be approved.
Well, I don't think shall means, well, then you might as well just say it's a
It's on-
360-day.
That's what I'm thinking.
Right.
Yeah, because shall be approved means it's automatic, so you give them 360 days for it to complete their application.
So in that case, I won't accept that friendly amendment either.
Right.
So then we need you and Ronit to vote. And it looks like we'll see what happens.
So you're
Ma-
voting on as
as-
written.
And well, as written, except I eliminated, but I eliminated only for extenuating circumstances.
Oh,
So the up to is not part of the motion at this point?
It is part of the motion.
Okay, so
No extenuating circumstances.
no extenuating circumstances, but up to 180 days is still
Yes.
part of what you're proposing.
That's the
Okay?
motion I made.
Up to you, Stacey.
And that motion was seconded.
Yes.
Yes.
That motion was seconded.
Yes.
So the
And
motion,
you,
And so Alex and Ronit have to vote.
But you would be okay with an extension of 180 days as may be approved? So it's either yes or no at 180 days?
yes. It's up to 180 days, not, 180 day implies that it's a 360-day permit,
If
is
you
what
make
we're
it-
getting.
Right, so you can still not approve it, and you've got to get it done by 180 days.
Yes. The thing that I took out
Right.
extenuating circumstances because I felt that was a little, got to your point, Alex, that there was too much wiggle room in that one.
And
That
if these
could be-
projects barely made it in at 4 or 5 months, what
No,
if we
you can
just said,
extend the
what if we
100
just said 270 days? I mean, just, my concern is just, I mean, it feels like 180 days is tight. And.
But you can
then-
extend beyond that, that's not the.
But it's discretionary.
Yes. But it doesn't require extenuating circumstances to be discretionary.
Yeah, which, I think back to Ronit's point, I feel like we really need to, I mean, there's just, feels like there's a lot of there's maybe some more, I don't know if there's anything so pressing that it needs to be approved tonight, and maybe that there's more homework to be done to see kind of exactly how some of these other jurisdictions.
Zach, comment?
If you feel a one-year timeframe is more appropriate, I think the goal here is to add a timeframe into the code, whatever you feel is appropriate. So if you would rather omit the extension and just say you have 360 days or 12 months to be deemed complete, the goal here is to put a timeframe in the code so an application has a fixed period of time to get through this process as opposed to an unended period of time. So the 180 days was an average, appeared to be the most consistent with many of the practices of the other jurisdictions. It wasn't the shortest. A lot fell into that 6 to 9 months, but if you feel a different number is appropriate and maybe remove the extension, the two-tiered approach was primarily there to motivate an applicant within 6 months, but give them the cushion of knowing they had another 6 months if it was not feasible. And as I noted with the other applications that moved forward and were ultimately approved, none of them took over 6 months to address their incomplete letter. But if you feel there's a different time frame that's more appropriate, because that's the underlying goal. It's not 6 months or 9 months or a year. It's to create a time frame under which an application must operate.
So from staff's point of view, the fact that there is an absolute number gives you the tool to keep applications moving.
Yes, and if it's, as I mentioned before, codes change, and when an application's not deemed complete, it's subject to every code change that takes place. It's not until an application's deemed complete that they lock in the codes that they're subject to. And so if an application's open a year or 2 years, the water efficient landscape regulations may change. Building codes, which affect their design, may change. Code amendments may happen. And so we also want to avoid goalposts moving for an application during the process, and by keeping a time frame that's reasonable but not extensive, you're keeping applications moving or requiring them to resubmit and address the codes that may have changed in the interim.
So let me just add, I don't know that there is a code emergency right now requiring the implementation of this tonight. And is there any harm in revisiting this with additional information, both the text, the language actually presented to us from these other jurisdictions so we can compare and contrast and have kind of a more in-depth discussion about who would be affected by this in the last 5 years, what are examples of projects that would have been affected by this, so we can have a more complete discussion.
If that's what it takes to make you feel comfortable at this, I'm willing to withdraw my motion, because getting more information is never a problem. And Zach,
I'm sort of in that boat.
yeah, and Zach didn't say we need this now because we have this backlog that we're trying to move of people who
It
are not.
won't apply
being-
retroactively anyway.
Right, so, okay. So I withdraw that motion, and I move that we ask staff for clarification of the one part of this zoning ordinance change that we didn't approve, that we didn't recommend for approval.
Sorry, what was that last part?
I made more work for you. I said,
Well, not a whole
could,
lot.
So move
well,
for continuance.
move for continuance, subject to more information from staff to clarify the points and requests from Commissioner
That they've
Bernini.
actually already developed, it's just a matter of sharing with
Yeah.
us, so it's really not
Information
extra
is
work, so.
gathered.
Just put it on the next agenda. I mean, we'll,
Yeah.
Cool.
So do you want to continue that to a date certain?
Yes. How about next meeting?
okay, do I have a second on that?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well. Okay.
I think I want to keep this.
Ronit, thank you for your persistence. You got me to the point of confusion, which is great, because that means I'm not going to make a decision. Okay, number 3.
No, we're
No,
number 4.
number 4. Discussion item, capital improvement program, CIP, capital improvement program, and provide comments. Mr. Cornfield.
Okay, thank you. This is the first of 2 steps in reviewing our capital improvement program. Right now, the city council is looking at a mid-year update. And so they would like input from all, they're asking input from all the commissions on the capital improvement plan. And the idea is to provide input on changes to the work program, including if a new project should be added, or the timing of projects, or suggesting some projects that might be eliminated, and also looking at the unscheduled and unfunded project list, with the same idea of whether those should be removed or prioritized. And I should point out that we should be looking at this within the commission's area of responsibility for land use and traffic. So, and then one final caveat, the Administrative Services Director is also, from reading into the tone of her memo, she's noting that it is quite a robust capital improvement program, so we should be judicious if we're going to suggest adding to the council's workload on that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer your questions.
I have one. Do you put tenant improvements as capital improvements? If you need to improve any of the city buildings, would that be on this list?
Yes, that would be a capital improvement.
Okay, I agree to this. If it's not on this list, do we assume that the city's not looking at doing any capital improvements?
Yes.
So I'll give you an example, because I know the garden house at Shell Park never gets on this list in the 6 years that I've been on the commission. And it's in dire need of certain improvements. So that must mean that, A, the city hasn't looked at it to want to do anything, or B, they don't have any money to really pay it any attention.
There might be a third. There is a study going on looking at our city facilities, and we're looking at the state of them, whether we can upgrade the energy efficiency of them.
Because when I looked through this list, I saw mostly sewer, roads, that sort of thing. And I didn't see much for specific buildings, so that's why my question. I would have thought more improvements to buildings would have been included in this capital expenditure.
I think, this council's priorities are, there might be, if I'm reading into it, we have some potentially large capital improvements related to replacing civic center buildings. So, not knowing where that's going.
So you say there's a separate study looking at facilities?
We are looking at the citywide facilities and the state of the buildings as a staff.
Yeah.
And so we have yet to, I'm not sure if we're going to be providing that information to the
We haven't in
council
6 years.
on this update, but it is an action for the staff to look at these.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's my.
So we're not ready to recommend one thing or another on the city's facilities as a staff. So it is just definitely an area we're looking at.
Okay.
Oh, no, I should point out, I meant to mention, this commission will see the capital improvement program once council gets into this update. If they add any new projects, then that will have to come back to this commission for an analysis of whether it conforms with the general plan or not. So, but if they don't add any new projects, then it's presumed all the other projects are in compliance.
So I don't know, it's difficult for me to look at this and with any authority say, boy, I certainly agree with all this, or disagree with it. I just don't, I feel inadequate. I don't feel I feel that the information I have is inadequate.
But for example, tonight, the Loyola Corners traffic study is in the unscheduled and unfunded projects. And I don't believe that council gave direction about that particular piece tonight. And yet, I suspect that when they get into the CRP stuff, they're going to be discussing that, whether it's a traffic study or an economic feasibility study or whatever, because it's not in there.
Mhm. And that was an interest of this commission in terms of.
I don't know how this
preparing.
relates to
And it's-
budget.
We have noted that as a staff. I mean, we're gathering this information. We're going to be making recommendations to council. And that's one of them. The commission's already stated that once the bridges are done, we need to look at the circulation baseline at Loyola Corners and see how that affects the traffic.
And maybe I missed it, but also, I mean, just the whole discussion about the Loyola Corner specific plan, so not even just the circulation or the traffic, is that a line item on here? Because, I mean, the amount of time that could be spent on that's got to require budget, and I don't see
Yeah.
that.
It's not,
It's
and
not.
it really depends on where the council goes with the update.
Uh-huh.
If it's truly just an update where we're updating the language, clarifying it, and the demographics in it, we're really not making any changes, that's a staff level effort, we don't need a CIP. But if we're gonna do an economic study, if we're gonna do traffic studies, if we're gonna, then yeah, it's gonna turn into a CIP.
Right.
That would be
And
an
then,
example of what.
and then the same would apply to the community center redevelopment, the first item under buildings on the first detailed table page. I mean, that's only got a project balance of 203,000, and then I don't know, we'll maybe get to it in commissioner reports, but there was a petition that went to council, I didn't listen to the discussion, but about prioritizing community center redevelopment, and, I mean, that to me looks like a big one that's at minimum underfunded, depending on, whether that's decided to be prioritized as well, so, but other than that, you're right, I don't feel that I'm well enough informed to comment on pretty much any of the
One of
rest
the
of
things,
these.
what helps me when I'm looking at this list is, this has already been vetted.
Yes.
These are already approved.
Exactly.
They're scheduled.
Exactly.
They're prioritized.
Right.
Council's already made these decisions, and so it's just an opportunity for us. Have we come up with something in the intervening time that might affect this? So I'm not expecting to hear much. I certainly would be I would be outlining some areas that stuck out to staff.
Right.
There aren't any. But it's your opportunity.
We're not, are we voting on anything?
Trying to understand this a little bit better. The last page, the unscheduled and unfunded projects, it looks like there's different buckets that it comes out of, CIP, traffic impact fee, park and lieu. Like, how do you decide, like, the first two traffic calming, Fremont and Grand Avenue, come from a traffic impact fee, and like how does a dog park come from park and lieu? Like, what's that? What do those mean, those columns?
Those are the revenue sources. Some of them are funded by fees, by our ordinance. And so where we can fund them with a fee or a grant or something, then we want to make note of that, because then we can use our general fund dollars to fund other things. So it's a way of, right.
So park and lieu is a park fee, not a parking.
That's right. That's a
Okay.
park in lieu, parkland
Got it.
type fee, yeah.
So you just pull
Okay,
some
any
out
other-
of a bucket, that bucket.
Any other questions of, because we have one. Jim, thank you for staying awake.
My compliments. I enjoyed your discussion. It's always good to have discussion. Things come up. My name is Jim Wing. I live on Milverton Road. I'm here to simply ask you to improve the CIP that is on that list. That is CIP 1031, which is really the replacement of the flashing lights that are on San Antonio. This is a CIP that during council's review in the midterm budget review on March 21st, they discussed this CIP, and 3 council members requested that the flashing lights be retained, and staff did not present any design indications at that time. They did note that their concern was the maintenance cost that goes on to keep the 84 going, plus the fact that the OEM vendor has gone out of business, so it's very difficult to get them repaired. Also, in the discussions for the approval of the pedestrian master plan, flashing lights, specifically at council's request, were put in as one of the tools in that plan. So basically, they are approved for use in Los Altos. Now, this is something which we've had them since 2008. When they first were under review, the Traffic Commission spent 3 design reviews on it and went back and forth. Basically, a lower cost version was one that will be installed here ultimately anyway. And since then, we residents, and you too probably, we use them and we've learned the weakness of what we have right now. So in my opinion, that's why I feel that we need to have, through this group here, a design review of these. And this is part of this program here, existing CIP that we haven't seen the design for, and I think you and the public can improve whatever design that the staff comes up with. And so I would encourage you to go on record to asking that this should be a design review item. It's not clear when this will happen. From a budget standpoint, and what we went through in 2008, probably to get it done to where we satisfy the public, the cost is going up. The roughly a $320K that's in there right now just won't cut it to do this project probably right with current technology. Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Are you suggesting, Jim, that that the PTC
Yes.
request from city council that we be more informed about these things so that we can have
Provide your
adequate information to provide better feedback to them?
Yeah, and that's what a design review is. In other words, staff brings their drawings.
Well, I don't consider this design review for me. I don't consider what I'm getting here
Well, this is.
No,
this
no.
is-
a design
no.
review for me.
And you're quite right. What staff needs to do is to bring to you the design when it is done, and I don't know that it's done yet. There's some ideas what they want to do. Brings it to you so that they can present it, you can understand it, and you can relate to it. And then just like you do with drawings and then the development project, same thing. This is what the Traffic Commission did 3 times back in 2008. And every time the project got better in some ways. So, and keep in mind that I, as a resident, now I've got CIPs through the system as independent. Some of them took 5 years to get done. Very difficult to get a new CIP going. But what has happened here is the way staff has got this set up is they don't have to have any public review. They take the project straight out to bid. They get the bid. They go back to council and get approval for the financing and the award of the contract. And the public doesn't really get to say anything about it. A lot of the CIP projects, that's just fine. But this one here is very personal. And keep in mind, we've had 1 death on San Antonio, and that's 1 too many. So again, here, I would just, as part of your comments, and it goes into the minutes, that you request that you want a design review so that you are informed of this project. It is a traffic issue, because that's the problem, and it's in a relationship there. BPAC could be involved with it also, but I think you should be involved.
Right.
I have a question. So just to be sure, and I think you said this, but I just want to make sure I heard you correctly, you're suggesting just design review of that particular item, 1031, not every single item, because,
No.
yeah,
Just this one, anyway.
but I mean, and that, your interest around that one versus some of the others, which you could argue, God forbid, root foaming or anything else is needed design review. Your specific concern about this is because it's in your area of expertise, or can I ask why? Why does this one, why do you want this one to be design reviewed?
Well, I have crossed San Antonio around 4,000 times, okay? I was the one who blocked the payment to the contractor. I spent 20 days watching the exact lights each day and finding which ones were out, and I analyzed the failure mode. I went to Philips, a manufacturer of LEDs, understood the technical problem. I went to
Let's
the...
pretend okay,
I
all
went
right,
to
that's,
the-
okay, so you've got quite the expertise. One
got
other
skin-
point, the
skin in
death.
the game.
Yes,
You're
okay,
gonna get
thank
to
you.
know Jim.
I can, actually, he was at design review a few
Oh,
times
okay,
too, so, but not as much as here, I'm sure. One other point, I believe the death on San Antonio was before the addition of the flashing
Oh, yes.
process. So we have not had any
That's
deaths since
That's
those.
what triggered everything.
Exactly, right, I recall.
2008, yeah.
So the lights, although they may be imperfect, at least have been,
Yeah, and this
Okay,
CIP
thank
gives
you.
a chance to improve them.
okay.
All right,
All
thanks,
right,
Jim.
thank
All
you.
right.
I guess I don't, hold on a minute, Jim. I guess I don't understand what the design aspect is of flashing lights, because it feels to me like it's a technical approval. It's binary. Either they work or they don't work. It's not as though there are things of beauty in them.
Okay, now, this is where, this is the insight I've had when these discussions came up primarily as to what staff may want to use. And they want to go away from the flashing lights. And they want to basically use a hawk light. And the hawk light that they're thinking about, and with this price range, is tucked about where the rectangular flashing light is, which we do have trouble seeing. And a hawk light is smaller, and it's harder to see unless it's placed in the right place. And so therefore,
That's why it's a design issue.
there's more to this than, it has the flashing light title in there, and that's what they like to work around it. And since 2008, flashing light technology has improved, so they could be kept, because everything, it takes more than one type of light to make San Antonio safe for pedestrians. And that is it's a tough design. I mean, staff has a challenge to design it, or the consultant who does it. And probably a consultant will do it, and I'm not sure that a consultant understands the 24/7 problems we have with going across San Antonio. Sight lines are very tough. I use Lyell all the time because of the sight lines, and so they are better there than the other places.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Sure.
Is this an action item on our part?
Mr. Chair, yes, if there are some recommendations, this would be the time. And I will I would like to add that in response to Mr. Wing's concerns, he did share a letter with staff about this, and the Transportation Services Manager agrees that this particular project would benefit from design review input. So we certainly support his.
Has Daniel Varela spoken to us ever?
Excuse me?
It says here that the project manager is Daniel Varela. That's what it says.
He's
on-
a consultant.
Oh, he's not in staff. He's an outside
I
consultant.
didn't know him either.
Oh, excuse me.
He's I think, assistant engineer.
He's a new staff member.
Ah, okay. So perhaps,
Busted.
so perhaps we might ask if he could give us a little feedback on this, give us a little report on this. Is that something we can request?
Or should we just ask for the design review as suggested?
If you feel that's necessary to decide whether you want to recommend design review of this.
I think the only thing that I say about that is that we're PTC and we see very little T.
It's true.
It still feels like PC to me. Doesn't, I mean, it just does, I mean.
Yeah, we're not recommending design review on a lot of these things because they are very technical and the design has to meet certain specifications, Caltrans standards.
Yeah,
and so
right.
forth.
Probably
So
go over all of
it-
that.
It sets an expectation that we can do more than that. But this is a case where we have choices. And
Okay, so I think this is only, you listen to our comments and that's about it, right?
Right, so, I mean, I've just heard that
We feel inadequate.
you didn't have enough information really to make you consider this. Seemed like there might be support for the
I'm supportive.
design review.
Of design review for this.
mean,
Staff is
I-
supportive. I'm supportive.
I would like a clear sense from the commission whether, because I have to represent this to the administrative group.
I
the will
can-
of the commission
I can
is,
support design review for this,
Yeah.
of one item.
That's a majority.
You want me to have a motion on that? Do we support, it? Do you want a
Motion
motion?
would be good. That would be the best.
Okay, do I have a motion on board?
I move that we recommend to City Council that Planning and Transportation Commission have design review of item TS 01031, the illuminated crosswalk replacement.
No?
Second?
All right, any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you for that.
That wasn't so hard. All right, thank you. Okay, commissioners' report and comments. Who went to the last city council meeting? You probably saw the approval of a certain building, right?
I did not go, but I did review the.
Okay, same thing.
The tape. And as this is my first time doing this,
Oh, I have to grade you.
He
I have
took
to gra-
copious
Yeah.
notes.
I have to grade you.
The city council did approve unanimously, the approval of 1540 Miramonte.
With certain modifications.
Certain modifications. Let's see, they changed some of the building materials. They created an overhang in front of the retail.
Articulation is what they call it, right?
Articulation. They extended the northern wall to enclose the exterior stairway.
Oh, good. That was a nasty bit.
They reduced the railing, almost eliminating except for a 10-foot section. And they expanded the retail by 100 square feet to 1,600 square feet. They also expanded the building by some unknown quantity, which was not discussed. But I think it made some of the master bedrooms slightly bigger.
Didn't they do something with the roof line as well?
The building, the profile's the same. What they did is extended the northern wall out about 5 feet to enclose the exterior stairway, and it expanded the retail space by about 100 square feet. And then it made the balconies that are on the north side recesses in the building rather than projections. And so in some ways, it simplified that elevation, and then they added, they used the stone element to enclose the stairway.
And the conditional approval was based on divided light windows. It was unclear whether there was a manufacturer that could provide true divided light and still meet Title 24. So that'll be at the discretion, I guess, of the
Building department.
building department.
So they weren't proposing simulated divided lights with muntins between the glass?
They were asking for a true divided light.
That should be very interesting.
And I believe the mayor pointed out that, I believe it was the mayor pointed out that it could be difficult from a maintenance standpoint on some of these elevations to clean true divided light. I think the other condition was French doors. And the third one was that the trim projects rather than be flush with the stucco. And I think the architect clarified that that was the intent.
Good changes.
They provided EV parking. They removed storage units and relocated those. There's a lot of discussion around the trash enclosure.
Always a hot topic.
Yeah, which was not shown on any rendering. And there was a request to abut the trash enclosure to the building instead of leaving this 4-foot gap for vegetation that's never going to happen on a north elevation. But it was not made, I don't believe it was made a requirement or a condition of approval, was it?
It was to work it out with staff.
Yeah. I do think that they added a fourth condition, which was to the doors along B, Avenue, is it Avenue B?
B Street.
B Street. Looked too industrial and they wanted more
Rustic.
articulation or residential type feel to those doors. They asked for full photovoltaic on the roof. It was described by the architect to be not really feasible. And again, it passed unanimously.
Okay. Good summary. Pretty darn good for the first time.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to summarize everything else that
No,
happened.
you did good.
Only the stuff that
Only
affects.
stuff that, okay.
Yeah.
So
that's-
I shouldn't have listened to an hour discussion on ad hoc council subcommittee related to drafting the senior commission charter.
I never do.
Now you tell me.
Any potential future agenda items?
Can I just go back to one thing, just because I want to make sure that, I guess, next agenda, we asked Zach to go back and provide some information, and just so, I guess we have all the information. I'm looking at the submittal requirements for commercial or multifamily design review, and it looks like, and I know it's a sensitive topic to this committee, but the story poles are in here, and so is that something that needs to be done to be deemed a complete application?
At this time.
Story polls don't go up until you're scheduled for a public meeting, and the requirements similar to public notification that you have at least 10
And-
days before the first public meeting.
And we requested that there be an agenda item to discuss that further, once we actually had an example up, which is coming.
If you want to see a lot of story polls, go down to Los Gatos, the North 40 project, the Orchard.
For one project?
How tall?
They're huge, it's a big.
There's 2- and 3-story buildings.
17 and 85.
Is it on Stevens Creek? Where is it?
It's not right off of 17.
17 and 85, Los Gatos Boulevard,
Oh,
kind of,
It's worth
I
taking
will.
pictures if it,
I think I might, yeah.
yeah, it's interesting, it's a sea of orange.
So as you take 17 from 85, it's on the right? On the left?
Be on the left.
Okay.
And if you get on, I think it's at Lark and Los Gatos Boulevard, those are kind of
Yeah.
the 85, 17, Lark, and Los Gatos Boulevard.
But it's in a relatively undeveloped, you have a clear
It's in an
view from the
orchard.
highway.
None of them are directly adjacent to a sidewalk or
Ah.
an aesthetic, so.
Should
they
be
were-
very
they-
interesting.
There is a ability to secure them in a different way then.
We don't have many orchards left except on city property at this moment.
Any other items?
Yeah, and then just if you could provide just the laundry list of technical studies that could be required as part of it, just so we have a sense.
That's it?
That's it.
Then you adjourn.